So I've recently had an experience that happens occasionally. It all comes down to communication in the industry. So to start off with, I get an email saying lens compatibility. So the customer's got a lens system, that's the first thing I can establish. A few emails go backwards and forwards, and eventually we work out that it's an Oxford Rail J27, and the issue is that the sound works but the loco won't drive. It's an odd one. My first thing is to try and work out what decoder the Locomotive is fitted with. The customer can't tell me, so we have to use a little bit of common sense to try and work out what the manufacturer has applied. Obviously the first thing you do is Google it. It's going to be either a Zemo or an ESU if it's a sound decoder. They tend to be the market leaders, and that tends to be what turns up in British manufactured items. But it's not a given. Some manufacturers have their own bespoke items made. But in this case, it turns out that it's an ESU Locksound version 5. So the first thing I know immediately that there is no compatibility issue with ESU decoders and lens. And in fact, there's very few decoders I've ever come across that have direct issues. The last one I remember being a little awkward were the MTH ones. But again, I suspect most of that was down to communication, and we don't encounter them very often. So, can't sort it out, so I actually asked the customer to send the loco in. It seems to be the only way I can work out what's going on, whether the locomotive is faulty or whether there's something else going on. So the loco arrives, I put it on the programming track, I establish that it's still on the delivery address of 3, and so I check it out and it runs. Brilliant. Okay. Even better, it runs with sound. So what's the issue? The one clue I have got is the gentleman's other locos work. So it's specific to this loco. So at this point we break out the manual, and this is the manual, and it actually does confirm that it's an ESU chip. And the first thing I suspect is some sort of braking function. Because it is something that occasionally comes up, and it's something that the British manufacturers are a bit obsessed with. So it turns out function 8 is a dynamic brake. If you turn function 8 on, you see 8's come up on the screen there. Oh. Oops. Sorry. So it is, in the end, what I suspected. It is a braking function that hasn't been explained. Which brings me around to the real purpose of this film, which is locomotive instruction manuals. Good practice, and practice that could be tightened up. To be fair to them, the Oxford Rail one is fairly good in general respects. Pop that off. There are 2 manuals with the loco. There is the general manual, which applies to analogue and digital locos, so cleaning and maintenance basically. And I like that, that's separate, and yeah, it does cover what a lot of people have already known, but always handy. And there is quite a comprehensive manual for the loco. And here's the sort of bugbear. It's too comprehensive. There's a huge amount about decoder programming in here that should be separated. So you've got section 2 is the operation of the loco, and as you can see there, that's all the functions. And if we focus in on function 8, dynamic brake, but it doesn't explain it. So even, I'm pretty sure the customer has read the manual. There's an awful lot of warnings, which I think puts people off, to be honest. That could be tucked away at the back of a technical manual. Yeah, don't get it wet and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of technical jargon again that could be put into a separate technical manual. So you almost just need a crib sheet. This is how the loco is expected to run and drive. And then include the more technical decoder setting stuff in a separate booklet, which other manufacturers do. Or it's a downloadable thing, because let's be honest, the loco is delivered set up by the manufacturer. It should be at a setting that is, you know, most people will be happy with. So there's no need for someone starting out in the hobby to know any of this stuff. In fact, I think it puts people off. It's handy to go in and tune locos, and once you've learnt it, it's a nice skill, but it's not really essential to the hobby. So I've had quite a lot of backing and forth with this loco, so it's generated a lot. First, I've got to defend the reputation of the lens system I've sold. To a certain extent, I want to defend manufacturers' goods as well. This is actually a pretty decent loco, so it is purely a communication error that has resulted in the problems and the customers disheartened. He's brand new to digital, and he's been confronted with a lot of things that he really doesn't need to know. So, yeah. And I think what's happened is that he's got a whole load of functions lit up on his controller. And of course you've got function levels, so you've got function group 1. I'm actually using a restricted function group, so I've got 28 functions set up on this handset at the moment. So the bottom line there, function group 0 is functions 0 through 9 on the lens system. And if you press F, function group 1 is 10 through 19. And at this point I've got it limited at 28 because I'm actually using the old base unit, but it could go up to 69 functions cycling through there. So you can see where someone's starting off, it does get a little bit difficult, but it's really unfortunate. It's just because this function is turned on, the loco won't drive. So as a nice example of good practice here, we've got a Roco set of instructions. That is the function paper, function map I suppose they call it. It has a general section that just says brief things about the decoder, very brief, and that's all you need. And then it has the list, and the list is quite long because it's in 3 languages. But the nice thing about this is it has little notes like this only works if function 1 is switched on, this only works if the loco's driving. And then there is a brief description of something that's in function 15, loco drive, departure sequence. So one of the more interesting functions there has a full explanation. And then you've got a basic CV set, which again, most people starting out wouldn't need to know. But it is a nice, neat little table. They also have the parts manual, So that's a separate thing, and that applies to analog and digital. And in the digital locos you have a more general sound decoder manual. That, because they're using Zemo, probably not mentioned in there, it might be, I haven't read it. I tend to also go in and download the full Zemo manual when questions arise. Again, that's more advanced and it's only really very rarely used. For someone starting out in the hobby, it's utterly irrelevant, so that would remain filed at the bottom of the box and ignore it. This single sheet of paper is telling you everything. One of my bugbears with manuals is that they're printed in tiny font. I think that's 8 point, it might even be 6 point. Yeah, we're all getting older. But this is a Rivarossi one. It's got a reasonable quick description and a list of functions there, but no annotation about what the functions may affect. So there is an emergency brake there. I think that stops the train as well, so that's another one there, function 12 on this particular model, that may cause the train not to move. I'd have to play around with that. But then there's also something down here that hasn't applied for 25 years, so okay. Maybe they need to go back and read the manuals. And then you've got a technical breakdown. This is, once again, an ESU decoder fitted in this particular model. So again, if you wanted to get really technical, go and download the full ESU manual off the ESU website. But this side is very much, you don't really need to know. This side is general information and the function list, which is the key thing for the model. So I wanted to end on a nice positive one. Here is an example of best practice with a manual. It's nicely presented. Got a little history, always nice. It's got unboxing information because it's bolted to a frame, so that explains that. General accessories, fitting a chip if it's not fitted, but this is a sound one. Bit of maintenance, and all of the functions of the Loco are cleanly described in a nice size print, actually. At least it's 12 point, so I stand a chance of reading that. F7 here is brake application, but they've explained in this case it will just activate a sound. If you go and activate this real drive, then it will brake the Loco like the real thing. Stop the Loco, I should use the word carefully. And they go on with the rest of the functions. And back here they will explain real drive. And that's the first bit of programming you'll encounter. So real drive, really for people that are really comfortable with their DCC systems. So the model is immediately accessible to someone getting it out of the box as their first digital Loco. Excellent. And then you can put an advanced feature on there if you know what you're doing. It doesn't spoil your enjoyment of the product that it's not turned on. I think they've learned that through the first Loco they did, an O-gauge that had the braking feature on it, and it was had the same issue, people were reporting them as faulty. So hats off as a manufacturer that has developed and learnt and kept its manuals concise and to the point. And they've produced some beautiful models. So really this is a plea to manufacturers to keep their manuals concise. Treat them as if it's the first time the customer has ever seen a digital model. And keep it simple, don't scare them off with a million warnings, and don't give them the Mercedes engine's tuning guide. A lot of manufacturers have worked this out and they have that as a downloadable supplement. So only someone who knows what they're looking for will go off and download it. The manual, like this Lionheart manual, should just contain everything relevant to running the Loco straight out of the box. It's already tuned, it's already set up, and it's also a plea to customers to read these manuals because they are a mine of information. So if we want to get super technical, a resolution to this problem is to actually go in with the ESU decoder programmer and disable this function. So function 8, break 1. Oops, I can do. This is an expensive thing that customers should never have to do. Break 1. So taking out that break function. You need the programmer to do it. It's so difficult to, well, you can sit there with the manual and try and work out all the values, but the programmer is slightly quicker. Except, of course, it feels the need to go and rewrite the firmware on the decoder. So we may pause while it does this. So it's done. This is the rabbit holes we go down, which are completely unnecessary. We put function 8 on, got the sound, and the Loco runs even though function 8 is on. That's an extreme solution to the problem, but I'm quite happy with it. Manufacturers, explain your models.